She barged into my cabin without even knocking, waving some papers and yelling, "You can't be here! This whole lake belongs to the HOA and I run it!" Her voice shook the quiet morning like a siren. I didn't even move from my chair. I just looked at her, calm as stone, while she stomped across my wooden floor like she owned the place. "Pack your things right now," she demanded, "or I'll call the sheriff myself." She had no idea the sheriff was already on his way, because I had invited him, and he wasn't coming alone. Karen glanced at the table and froze for a second when she noticed two coffee mugs placed across from mine. She blinked, realizing someone else was supposed to be here. "Who are you waiting for?" she asked, her voice sharp but uneasy now. I leaned back and smiled. Let's just say, the person I'm meeting with knows exactly who really owns this land, and once they arrive, you'll regret stepping inside my cabin. Her fake confidence wavered, but she tried to cover it up. "Don't play games with me. This whole area is HOA territory. You think anyone's going to take your side?" She didn't know that someone very powerful already had.
Before she could shout again, the sound of heavy boots echoed on the wooden porch. Karen spun around, expecting to see her backup or maybe some HOA board member. But when the door opened, her face drained of color. It wasn't some neighbor or handyman. It was the county sheriff himself, in full uniform, with two deputies right behind him. Karen's voice cracked. "Officer, thank God you're here. Arrest him. He's trespassing on HOA property." She shoved her papers at the sheriff like they were sacred law. But the sheriff didn't even glance at them. Instead, he looked straight at me and nodded. "Mornin'. Sorry I'm late." Karen's jaw dropped. "Wait, you two know each other?" she stammered. I stood up slowly, letting the silence hang in the air. "Know each other?" I said with a small laugh. "We've been working together for years." The sheriff folded his arms. "Ma'am, I think you're the one trespassing here. This cabin doesn't belong to the HOA. It belongs to him." He pointed directly at me. Karen's face twisted in shock, her lips trembling. "That's impossible! The HOA owns this lake! We have the documents!" "Documents," the sheriff repeated with a smirk. "Funny, because we've got the real ones."
Karen's hands shook as she waved those papers like they were her golden ticket. "Look, right here. It says the HOA has full control over this cabin and the lakefront." She shoved them at the sheriff, her voice getting louder, more desperate. The sheriff didn't even touch them. Instead, he motioned to his deputy, who unfolded a thick folder and laid it neatly on my table. "These," the sheriff said, "are the county's original property deeds, notarized and signed long before your HOA even existed." He slid the papers across to me, like passing judgment. "This land doesn't belong to your HOA, ma'am. It belongs entirely to him." Karen's face went pale. She scanned the documents, her lips moving silently as if reading could somehow change the truth. No, this can't be right." I leaned forward, my voice low and steady. "Karen, your little game is over. You thought you could scare me out with fake notices and threats, but you forgot one thing." I paused, letting her stare back at me frozen. "I know the law a whole lot better than you think." Just then, a black SUV rolled up outside. The sound of its engine made Karen jump. She turned to the window, confusion painted all over her face. Who else is coming?" she whispered. I smiled. "Someone you really don't want to see." The cabin door creaked again as the SUV's headlights cut through the window. Karen clutched her fake capers like a shield, her breath quick and shaky. The deputies straightened their stance, and the sheriff didn't even flinch. He knew exactly who was about to walk in.
The door swung wide, and a tall man stepped inside, dressed in a dark suit with a badge gleaming on his belt. Karen's mouth fell open. Federal? She whispered, her voice cracking. The man didn't bother looking at her. He walked straight to me, shook my hand firmly, and said, "Good to see you again. Thought I better come in person." His tone was calm, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that made Karen's knees weaken. Wait, she stammered, her voice high-pitched now. This doesn't make sense. Why would a federal officer be here for him? He finally turned toward her, his eyes cold. "Because, ma'am, you've been filing fraudulent claims and threatening a federal contractor on his own property." Karen's face twisted in disbelief. "Contractor? Him? No, he's just some squatter in a cabin." I took a step closer, my eyes locked on hers. "You should have checked who you were dealing with before storming into my home. I don't just live here, Karen, I work here. And people far above your HOA already know exactly what you've done." Her fake authority shattered in an instant. For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. Karen's fear quickly turned into wild desperation. She fumbled for her phone, nearly dropping it as she dialed furiously. "I don't care who you think you are," she screeched. "I'm calling in HOA security right now. We'll see how tough you are when backup arrives." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, amused. "HOA security? You mean those rent-a-cops you pay under the table?" Her eyes darted around, realizing he already knew too much. They have authority," she shouted, clinging to the last thread of her fake power. The federal agent stepped forward, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. "No, ma'am. What they have is a long list of charges waiting for them. Impersonating officers, illegal detainment, trespassing." He held up a small recorder, "And thanks to tonight, we've got everything we need." Karen froze, the phone slipping slightly in her hand. You set me up?" I couldn't help but smirk. "No, Karen, you set yourself up. All I had to do was let you talk." Outside, the rumble of engines grew louder. Headlights flooded the cabin's windows. Karen's lips curled into a twisted smile, thinking her rescue had come. "There, now let's see you laugh." But when the vehicles pulled in, her smile collapsed. They weren't HOA guards. They were more law enforcement SUVs, real ones, with flashing lights washing the lake in red and blue. The blue and red lights bounced off the water, flashing across Karen's stunned face. She stumbled back, her phone slipping from her hand as real officers poured out of the SUVs. Neighbors had begun to gather near the shoreline, their whispers carrying in the night air. They had seen her storm into my cabin like she owned it, and now they were watching her power crumble. One officer read from a clipboard, his voice loud enough for everyone outside to hear. "Karen Miller, you are under investigation for filing fraudulent HOA claims, impersonating law enforcement, and attempted property seizure." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out, only a weak, broken squeak. "This is a mistake," she suddenly screamed, thrashing as deputies closed in. "I am the HOA. This whole lake belongs to me." The sheriff shook his head. "No, ma'am. This lake belongs to him." He gestured toward me, his voice steady and sharp. The neighbors' eyes swung to me, surprise written on their faces. Some whispered, some nodded slowly, realizing the truth. Karen's knees buckled as deputies cuffed her hands behind her back. She turned her head toward me, her face twisted with fury and fear. "You think you've won? You don't know who you're dealing with." I stepped closer, my voice low so only she could hear. "Neither did you."
And with that, they dragged her out of my cabin, past the flashing lights and the stunned crowd, her cries echoing uselessly into the night. As Karen was shoved into the back of the squad car, the crowd outside grew restless. Neighbors who had once followed her orders like sheep were now muttering, their voices rising with anger. One man stepped forward, holding a crumpled notice. "She fined me $300 last month for parking in my own driveway." Another woman clutched her child's hand and said, "She threatened to take my house if I didn't donate to the HOA fund." The sheriff nodded at the federal agent, who opened a thick binder and held it up for all to see. Inside were copies of dozens of complaints, forged signatures, and bank statements. Every dirty secret Karen and her board had been hiding. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the truth spilled out. "This wasn't just one woman," the agent said. "Her entire board has been running a scam, funneling your money, forging documents, and bullying anyone who stood up to them. Tonight, it ends." A wave of relief and fury washed over the neighbors. Some shouted, some even cheered. And for the first time, I saw them look at me not as the outsider Karen painted me to be, but as someone who had stood up when they couldn't. Karen pressed against the cruiser's window, screamed like a cornered animal. "You'll regret this! I am the HOA! I built this place! You can't take it from me!" But her words were drowned out by the sound of the crowd turning against her. I stepped onto the porch, raising my voice just enough for everyone to hear. "She thought she owned your homes. She thought she owned this lake. But she forgot the truth. This land belongs to the people who live on it, not to some fake queen with a stamp and a temper." The crowd erupted in applause, their voices echoing across the water. For the first time, Karen's power wasn't just gone, it was shattered in front of everyone she once controlled.
The night grew quiet after the last cheer faded, broken only by the ripple of the lake against the shore. Karen sat caged in the cruiser, her head lowered, the fire gone from her eyes. For years, she had barked orders, bullied families, and twisted the law to her own will. And now, with the whole neighborhood watching, she was nothing but another criminal waiting for her ride to jail. The sheriff turned to me, his voice low but firm. "You didn't just protect your own cabin tonight, you freed this community." I nodded, but my eyes went to the families huddled together, the single mom wiping tears from her cheeks, the old veteran standing tall again, the kids who finally looked safe. That was the real victory. Karen tried one last weak attempt, pressing her face against the glass. "You'll never keep this land, you'll see." But before she could finish, the federal agent shut the car door, her words swallowed by the slam of steel. The cruiser rolled away, its red and blue lights fading into the trees until the night was still again. I looked out across the dark water, and the reflection of the moon, steady and calm. After a long pause, I finally said, "I didn't fight for this country to be told I couldn't live free on my own land." And in that silence, the neighbors knew it wasn't just about one cabin. It was about standing against anyone who thought power meant control. Tonight, freedom had won.